Welcome back to video number 6 of our music education series. Today we're going to be discussing the responding section of the Georgia Standards and what some good examples of lessons and activities could be for students who are working through those standards. So for me personally, the responding section of the standards is probably my most favorite because it really gives the students a thorough grasp of exactly what's going on when they hear music and interact with music. Although the other sections of the standard are super helpful and equally as important, I am especially fond of the skills and just assignments and practices that come with this section. So in 6th grade, I'm going to read some of the requirements. Students are expected to be able to recognize and describe musical events in an oral example using appropriate musical terminology. So these would be terms such as verse, refrain, A-B and ABA, rondo, introduction, coda, theme and variations, and so on. Steps, skips, major, minor, different stylistic terms, unison, and harmony. So a lot of these assignments would be pretty straightforward. You would probably want to have a worksheet or a piece of paper that's given out to each student, and you would want to have a piece of music prepared that you would play for the students, and then they individually would recognize those musical concepts that have already been gone over, or maybe were just briefly gone over at the beginning of class if you're introducing this concept, and then be able to write about it by the end of class, each student. These would be fairly easy to grade because you would know what musical concept was present and probably wouldn't want to give them anything that had multiple concepts present so that you can easily tell if the student identified the concept that was used or not. So you might have a song that has a verse and refrain, play it for them, have them write down what was there if it was a verse and refrain, and if they write down a theme and variations, then that is incorrect. So pretty straightforward to grade, but still exercising the oral skills that the student needs in order to hear a piece of music and really digest it. The next little subpoint is be able to orally distinguish between various ensembles. So if you put on a symphony orchestra recording of a piece, the student needs to be able to tell that it's an orchestra that's playing. Whereas if you put on a choir, that's voices. This one should be fairly easy for students, but they may need to be prepared and equipped with the terms so that they know. A large vocal ensemble is going to be a choir or a chamber group of some kind. More tricky would be some of the instrumental pairings. So if you have a string quartet versus a trio or something like that. And then next is orally distinguishing between soprano, alto, tenor, and bass instrument and voices. So this is kind of similar to the string quartet predicament. Students need to have kind of a very honed in ear for some of this. It's a little bit easier to tell a lot of times with voices, especially if there's 4 parts all singing at once, but with string instruments sometimes that is difficult to tell the difference between, and so you can work on that with your students with just lots of examples of maybe instruments playing solo and then a combined video of several strings playing in different registers and areas. And then for singing, students can actually practice singing the register or the octave that they would be singing in, depending on their voice part, and that will help them distinguish between what is too low or too high for them to reach and what they are able to reach. That will help them have a starting point for how to find what voice part is where. And then this one is fun. Orally identifying tonal center. So students need to understand how many whole steps and how many half steps are going to get you a major scale. That's something that might take a little while to go over and memorize, but by the time that is something that's familiar, students should be able to orally identify where do is. I like to use solfege. I find solfege really helpful because I think it helps students be able to hum it or sing in their head and really understand where notes are and where they should be, and hear that things are different when fa is fi, or the pitch has been altered or chromaticized. So by the end of going over this sort of thing, 6th graders should be able to hear a melodic line that has certain half steps and whole steps and tell where do or the root is. And you can come up with some fun assignments to do this with, or you can just work on it slowly with examples. But that should be something that 6th graders are comfortable with by the end of the year. This final one is something that should be pretty obvious after the performance standard that has to do with diverse genres and cultures. This is just being familiar with characteristics of musical elements in music that have diverse genres and cultures represented. So this should be specific instruments from different parts of the world, call and response, styles, and uses of music. So students should remember, after performing or working on different genres, it should come to mind pretty easily, but it's a good way to review things that you've worked on performance-wise, and really make sure that students are understanding that fully in their head.